The first day of principal photography on any film is always nervous-making. Sometimes it lasts for an hour, and then you're flying. Sometimes it lasts for a day. In this instance, it was more than a day because I was mixing quite a substantial Japanese crew with keys, who would be English, German, and American. And a lot of, we do it this way, we do it that way, and you got to cut to the chase and say, no, we are doing it this way, we are paying. And that doesn't necessarily cut ice, that doesn't work. And so the confusion, there was a genuine confusion. I felt a genuine need to please, which could easily be misinterpreted. And I figured eventually it would be okay, but it was swimming upstream.
Among the many reasons that we wanted Ridley was his extraordinary visual sense. A lot of times I wouldn't understand, or I would question perhaps, the way something was being shot. And he would start to talk to me and he'd say, this, and this. And I'd go, but what about that? And then he would take out this pad of paper and he would draw it for me. And of course he was always right and I was always wrong. But it was such a incredibly generous thing for a director of that caliber to do, which is to actually draw it for me and show me how it was going to be.
I always start off every movie with a view to doing all the storyboard because that's what I used to do. And the board to me is absolute. It helps me think on paper. And the board helps you say, I can chapter it. I can just cut out and get on with it the next day. No one will even question it. When you see it well drawn, you can say, yeah, that works. Boards are very valuable. But, you know, also, I look at other directors. I'll look at something and remember something from 20 years ago, and I'm looking at this thinking, okay, get me out Willy Friedkin's French Connection. So I looked at that and realized it's probably, if not the best movie ever made in New York about a New York cop. It has to be number 2 or number 3. So I looked at that and I just loved the whole energy and dynamics of everything that happened. And so that was a big influence on me, actually. Even to the way it looked, because the weather in New York at that moment wasn't particularly attractive because it was usually overcast and gray and hazy and dirty, but that's what I wanted.
I hung out with some homicide detectives in the New York area. It's always hard for a short period of time. You look at somebody and have a profound respect of their courage. You also look at them, we're all a little crazy. There must be an element of almost thrill seekers, knowing some of the situations that they get themselves into, and how tough it is because you see just how vicious this world is. You know, mind you, in the 80s, New York was, I think, the homicide capital of the world, and it's entirely different from the one we have today, where the crime rate is so low.
We went in New York City. We were going around with a lot of the technical consultants who were detectives in New York, and we went out on raids and into Harlem, and we did a lot of drinking, a lot of police work, but also a lot of drinking. We did spend a lot of time with the policemen and the detectives in New York City. Some of them are in the movie, actually, and that's always rewarding. You get a sense of not so much the police work, but some behavioral aspects of their camaraderie, you know, how they conduct themselves, you know, the union there is amongst the detectives and the police officers.
And it kind of, we sort of added that to the kind of the rogue cop quality, somebody who was a biker, separated from his family. You also saw how tough it is on the salary these people had, that once you separated from your family, it was very seldom that you could afford to have your own house, your own place. A couple of the officers we met actually lived at the police station, you know, because they couldn't afford anywhere else to.
In those days, first-class cop, after alimony, is living below subsistence. So is he open to corruption? Absolutely. Is he open to a backhander? Is he open to cash on the side? Absolutely. So that's where you begin with the film. The guy's taken to this position by social conditions.
I don't like heroes, Compton. They think the rules don't apply.
Hey, look, I try to do my job, okay? It ain't easy out there.
meatpacking district, the fact that it's now mostly gone and is now $4 million apartments is a pity in a way. Yet another kind of way, it's saved the area and kept it for posterity architecturally. At the time, it was not something I thought would be particularly attractive to hang on to. The smell of the street was, you know, and yet that restaurant that we shot in was fantastic. It's one of the best steak houses in New York, and you're right in the middle of the meatpacking district.
We were doing that, and I had this gun that had a holster that you can take the gun out from the bottom like this, actually. You know, you can't see it for the camera, but you can put your hand underneath your coat and slip the gun out. So we did the scene a couple times, and I said to Ridley, I said, I want to show you something that I'm doing that no one notices that I'm doing, but you might want to use it. And he says, what? And I said, watch. And I put my hand down, and I put my gun down. And I said, he says, you've had your gun out all the time in the whole scene? I go, yeah. And he says, oh, well, let me shoot it. So he took a little piece and he shot a little insert of that. And yeah, it adds a little bit of tension to the scene because you know that I have a gun that I could use at any moment, but whether I'm going to use it or not. So
Joey, 911, babe, 911.
Police, take her down! Police, hold it! What'd you do here? Where'd he go? Get out of here, Ollie!
The meat market that you see early on where Sato escapes in New York, and how do you film me? And I love fluorescent lighting. So what I did is I got a whole bunch of 8-foot fluorescents and put them right in the middle of the frame. And I thought it's a little bit, I guess, inspired by Mondrian as a Dutchman, I guess. It's unavoidable. But it adds a lot more of a dramatic background. Instead of having just those plain walls, it instantly becomes more powerful. And that whole playful thing is like having light sources in the frame all the time. I think it's something that we both loved at the time.
And then inside the cold rooms, amongst the carcasses and the blood and the gore, and that was a good place to have a punch up with a knife.
I don't know that I could describe how Ridley saw the film. I can tell you that I've never worked with anybody with a clearer image of making a film. I mean, we spent a lot of time in pre-production together with Nori Spencer, who was the production designer. And listening to Ridley, driving around with the two of them all over Tokyo initially, and then later Osaka and Nara and other places that the film takes place, it was like an education to me.
I'm fascinated by architecture, by environment, and I've always felt architecture can lift you or crush you. And Japan, in those days, looked on the edge of, I would never use the word chaos in Japan ever, but on the edge of just holding on to it, because it's such a large entity. So how do I capture that? So Norris and I drove around Tokyo, pinpointing, trying to hang on to the most, stunning, shocking views. And then found that actually there wasn't a lot of old stuff. There wasn't much grubby stuff, which is, visceral stuff that you can always find in New York. That's why New York's such a great location. That's why the meatpacking district was so fantastic, because it's grungy. And I'm looking for a bit of Japanese grunge as well. There wasn't any. And then I started to think, Christ, these are all bloody Formica houses. What am I going to do? And so we started to look slightly farther afield. That coincided with us not having the authorities be terribly helpful towards us in Japan. We were very nervous about a big American film coming in to shoot in Tokyo. So somebody was looking at Osaka, and the governor there was very interactive, very competitive with Tokyo, saying, I want to have you here. So we bullet trained down to Osaka, met with the governor, who was much more outgoing, and said, come here, I'll give you everything. He did. So we went there.
One of the reasons he went to Japan is like, there's so much motion and movement in lights, it was like fantastic. So you use all the things that are there, and then not only that, he was able to enhance it with the production design in an even more extreme way, because it was never too much for him. You're like, if there was one light, maybe we can make it 3.
I think the movie really captures the Japanese culture, certainly as well as any American film I've seen. It's got real specificity and detail, and again, I attribute that largely, if not completely, to Ridley and to his vision, and also obviously to the script. But, you know, I can't help but when I remember or see certain scenes in the movie, I can't help but remember how difficult it was to get those shots.
The first day of shooting, we were in the governor of the prefecture of Osaka. Those offices were ours. We had spent days setting out the course, how we were going to shoot, how much time we would spend in each of the locations within the government house. I arrived the first day early on at the call, and somebody had written an article criticizing the government for allowing Americans to use government property to shoot a picture about Japan. And we were then pulled into the governor's office and told, the rules have changed. You think you can shoot here for the day, you can only shoot here for 2 hours, you have to come back Thursday to finish the shooting. And that's how the first week started, and it was a nightmare.
The Japanese didn't really understand the way an American movie was shot. So we would go in and we would look at a location, and after a lot of negotiations, they would say we could shoot in that location, but they would tell us that we had it from 10 to 5. So we had 7 hours. And then at 5 o'clock, we weren't done with our work often, and we would say, well, we'd like it for the next day, and they'd say we couldn't have it for the next day because we should have gotten our work done from 10 to 5. I mean, I remember lots of times, you know, Ridley would turn to me and he'd say, I need an extra half hour, go talk to the police. And I'd go talk to the police and I'd say, oh, you know, we just need an extra half hour. And the man would say, absolutely not. And then I'd try and like stall him. I'd try and make up like something just to keep him occupied so that he wouldn't come back and, you know, kick us off the set. And sometimes just by keeping talking to him or by saying, you know, and what happened today and what this, and just keeping babbling, we would get like an extra 15 minutes. And then the guy would always realize what I was doing, and then he'd come and grab Ridley and say, you're done. You know, it's like, it was a challenge.
Japan is a country where everything has to be permitted. So if you wanted to film on the street like in Osaka, you have to make a written proposal to the city and tell exactly where the camera is going to go. And on the centimeter, I'm going to put the camera like 2 feet away from the sidewalk, and then they ask where the lights will go. And you know, you never know where the lights will go till you get there. So I had to, in my head, make a scale. Well, I'll probably put a light there, 10K there, and this, and this. And then you go there, and then we saw the location. It was you know, it was a lot of different things, and the scene was altered. And so they said, no, you cannot move the camera. I said, well, we won't see the actor if you keep the camera here. And things like that have made it really, really difficult. They would not let us change a thing.
The difficulty about shooting in Japan, particularly at the end of the 80s, is, you know, movies was a very, very secondary industry compared to maybe what we have here in Hollywood. So the kind of cooperation that you would get is nothing compared to what we have in the US, particularly in cities like Osaka, where we were, or Tokyo. And I came to realize that's why most Japanese films, if you've ever seen them, they always shoot them in the countryside, because they can't begin to deal with logistics and problems of filming in the city, which we soon learned. If you shoot on the streets, here in the States, you may get a couple of hundred looky-loos that are watching what you're doing. In Osaka, you'll have 10,000 people, you know, watching the movie, and you don't have real police control. You have to hire your own kind of security issues and all of that to help make it easier.
I also will tell you that sometimes out of great adversity, some of the funniest things in the world happen. I remember when Stanley, Michael, and I were on our way to see Dailies, which is the film that was shot during the day. And they put us in a taxi cab, and we turned to the driver, who was, we thought, one of the drivers that the crew had given us, and we said, Dailies. And he said, yes, yes, yes. And we started to drive, and we're driving, and like a half hour's gone by, and I said, God, you know, it usually takes 10 minutes to get to Dailies.
We're going to the Hilton Hotel in Osaka. The taxi driver was on the way to Kyoto. The Hilton Hotel in Kyoto, which is about 120 miles away.
And we were just so tired from everything that was going on. We just started to laugh in the back of that cab. I would say in my life, I don't know if I've laughed harder. It was just a wonderful release of a lot of tension. And it was important because we were in a really strange place to make this movie. And it turned out to be a very hostile place to make the movie.
I don't know, Charlie. I can't figure this place out.
We actually had to bring I'd say at least a third of the movie back to the United States, because the people in Japan would not let us continue shooting in the locations that we had signed up for.
In terms of what's on film, all of the scenes that were in the Doten board, where Michael and Andy are surrounded by the bikers, was in Japan, because we wanted to get as much as we could of the neon. The government house was in fact in Japan, and a number of other little scenes.
Observers! You got it. Put it up.
But the ending scene, which is up at the farmyard in the vineyard, was in Napa Valley. And the beheading of Andy was actually done under the freeway in downtown Los Angeles. And the club that the scenes take place in, which Kate works, all done on a stage at Paramount in Los Angeles.
This will be very brief, okay? It's basically we arrive. As they slide into here, we should take in a couple of beats of you just looking around the club, enjoying it, whatever is going to happen, okay?
Ridley and I went to a lot of these clubs to see what they were like. And he and Nori spent a lot of time talking about it, and they built it. And it turned out to be extraordinarily cost efficient, because had we shot it on a location, we would have had to do some major work to make it work for us anyway. And we had total control of the environment being on a stage.
Basically what he did, he used the whole stage. He used the stage as a set. And all he did is add in curtains and all the lights, like tons of fluorescents, but they're all in the shot. So everything you see in the picture lights the actors. There's hardly any additional light. It's all there. And this was a huge space. I mean, like, you know, one of the big stages at Paramount, and everything you see is right there. So you see the interaction of light on the actors, which is so great, because normally it's always hidden, you know. It's like, I love that, because it also reminds you so much of Japan. It's like all the neon, the fluorescence, the strobe lights, it's all integrated.
I gotta talk to you.
I'm a client.
You gentlemen, the lady cannot play with you right now, so you're gonna have to play with yourselves.
These clubs where men who've worked 15-hour days, 16-hour days go and basically be admired, adored, and taken care of. The line between whether or not that was something that included sex or not was never very clear. I think that as a profession they were not including sex. But Ridley and I thought that perhaps some of that had occurred. And I worked for real as someone who was maybe going to train or maybe was interested, so I kind of did a little undercover work.
We went to the manager, who spoke very little English, and we asked him if I could work. And he thought that I wanted to work for real forever, and was like going, well, can you stay 3 months? Can you stay 6 months? Do you want to stay a year? And I'm going, no, because this is how you say no in Japanese. This is a big no, this is a medium no, and this is a little no. I was the big no. Anyway, they let me work. They were very sweet, and they let me work for a night, and I worked a 6-hour shift and was a hostess for real.
It was really something. Again, we didn't have the language, so I didn't know what they were saying to me, but a lot of the interaction felt very 11-year-old-like or 10-year-old-like, teasy stuff. Very naive, not at all what I had imagined.
America Jean.
She needs to get into that dress. She can go into anything else.
We dressed everyone, and everyone was Japanese. We had a lovely, lovely guy who was our associate producer, Alan Poole, who was there for Japanese cultural support, and he was the liaison between the Japanese community as well.
Jesus Christ, come by, have a good time. Come by. What? Up and down. In and out. Shit. Mas, if you're gonna start hanging out with NYPD, you're gonna have to do me a favor. What? You're gonna have to lose that Kmart tie, Mas!
I was lucky that Ridley gave me a lot of free reign in the film to contribute and to bring things and suggest things in the film, because the character was underdeveloped in the screenplay, but I had the support of Michael and Ridley to bring some ideas to the table, which they incorporated in the film, you know.
See the girl with the red dress on? She can butt like
was another song in the script. It was a slow song. You've lost that loving feeling, and I felt that you know was going to kill the movie at that point. You know, to have that slow song, and actually the character that Ken Takakura played, he wasn't supposed to come up and sing with me. That was something that I suggested to Ridley. I said, why don't we do this Ray Charles song, and I'll bring him up.
Ray Charles, yes! When you see me in a misery, wow! Come on, man.
I just felt that there had to be a situation where I had to have an impact on that character in the movie before I died, for him to sort of be motivated to continue and join in with Michael and try to seek revenge or so for my death, that I had to touch him in a certain way.
Assistant Inspector! Not you! I know, boss, I know. Assistant Inspector! The shit man! Masahiro Masamoto! Shit!
We've just seen the scene with him singing with Andy. How difficult was that to put together?
ものすごく難しかった。
Extremely difficult.
Did it take very long? And what did they have to do?
やはり随分時間をかけて練習したんですか？そしてどういうふうに練習したんですか？
スタジオにも行ったし、ミュージシャンの人と実際にこの映画に出てるミュージシャンの人と特別にセッティングしてもらって、スタジオでも練習しましたし、テープに撮ってもらって一人でも聴きましたし、それは本当に全然楽しむところには行ってませんね。
What do I look like? What do I look like? Chopped liver? What do I look like? Chopped liver?
Did you hear this?
I knew that Ken was an extraordinarily respected actor in Japan who had never even smiled in a movie, let alone sung in a film. So I remember after the sequence, Ken said to me, Andy-san, I've never done this before. What? And he says, and then they were translated. I never sing, never smile.
Hey, Ed, big shot from New York. Sir, you are chopped liver. Let's go, partner. Okay, partner. I'm gonna put Brother Ray in the can. All right. Good night.
I wanted to establish in the opening scene this idea of doing this Matador game with Michael on a motorcycle, and that was, you know, something, an idea I had. It wasn't in the script, and Ridley liked the idea. Michael said, "Oh, that'd be great." And so the thing I presented as a through line was, you know, when I get duped into following this guy, which causes my eventual death, that it would be done again with another motorcycle that I taunt, and then they take the coat from me. And Ridley ended up going with that and creating a whole sequence around that.
Come on, you little shit, right here! Right here! Fucking asshole! What?
When we filmed it, we saw this location. It's a train station in Osaka. And it has this amazing, gigantic long hall, and they let us film there for a couple hours at night. That's it. And so we were able to create this incredible dimension between the two of them walking in this strange, totally strange world, and then seeing this motorbike interior from a distance. Like, everything looks so weird, but we only had it for a couple hours. So when it goes to the outside, we had to then shift the scene. The exterior scene is filmed downtown Los Angeles. So we had to move, you know, the whole idea is like, how do you create continuity? How do you feel that same tension with all the slides? How do you create it in downtown? It's like, and Norris did a fantastic job is in this one overpass downtown is putting in, moving this gigantic rotating advertisement and rotating lights, and I added strobes on the ground so that kind of focus you each time where to look at it.
Charlie suffered many deaths. We tried everything except old age, I think. He got hit by a subway, which was very New York. He had a very New York-y death. He had a subway death, which is a personal favorite of mine, but the one that on the screen is not the one I expected to be there, and it really is great.
And Sherry and I laughed afterwards. We said, this is the last picture we're ever going to do where we have to talk about, does he kill him left to right or right to left?
Andy knew he was coming in to do that, and which he thought was pretty cool, that he'd get taken out about, I guess, 2/3 of the way through the movie. Maybe it's roughly that. And I always think that's an interesting thing to do, because life's like that. That's how things happen. One day you get a call to tell you somebody's dead. Last 2 days I've had 2 calls in 2 days to tell me somebody's died.
But the death was not easy to film. You know, it was The whole aspect of the decapitation was an entire process of first creating a double head, you know, and then finding out how to, you know, for Ridley, how to shoot that, you know. And I remember I'd gone to Tom Berman's studios to do my head, and I had to do the head in the position just after the blow. But for that part where I would fall backwards, Ridley had put a camera at a great distance, actually, with a very long lens at almost knee height. And I got on my knees and I put the head on my chest, and I bit the back of the head's hair to hold it so it wouldn't fall. So basically the head would be looking at camera, and because of the low angle of the camera, you'd never see my other head. But as the blade went over my head and then I went backwards and the head fell, rolled down my belly in between my legs, and it propped itself up and it was looking directly into camera, you know, on the ground. It didn't fall, it landed like this. I remember seeing it in the dailies, you know, and then the playback, how just by chance the head rolled over and then just kind of looked at the camera like that. So, you know, kind of saying, I'm dead, you know.
But the way in which he's killed is very shocking. Every time we ran the movie, you can hear a gasp in the audience when it happens, because you think that Andy and Michael are equal co-stars in the movie. You think that they're going to both go through this journey together. And when he's killed, you're shocked. And I think that's wonderful. I mean, I think it's like wonderful that there's a surprise in the audience, you know, that the audience doesn't know what's coming, that it's not predictable.
I know that once they started, you know, showing the movie and testing the movie, that the audience was not happy that I died, you know. Which on one hand, they're going, oh God, they really don't like, but the fact is, it's also a reaction where the movie is working very, you know, well at that point, and it propels the following acts of retribution and revenge, you know.
The hero cop's partner dying is not making motion picture history. What is different is that usually that is the jumping off point for, you know, a really great speech about revenge and doing the right thing and another 45 minutes of butchery. But we really got a chance to mourn this kid. We had a little period of mourning, and it's in the film. And there's a certain silence that happens after Charlie's death that's really admirable.
He was 28 years old.
We hoped and knew that it would be a painful price to pay, but he was sacrificing himself for the storyline, which was to say his loss told you how much trouble Nick was over there, you know, in Japan. And we felt we needed sometimes a statement that strong for you to understand what the stakes were at.
Please pardon my son. He came to comfort me, but all he does is show his disappointment.
You never even told me you had a son, Mas.
The movie is based on character, and I think what attracted all of us to it is the great characters that were there. It isn't just wall-to-wall action. It's an action movie with great characters, or it's a character movie with great action, and I actually think it's a character movie with great action.
We were going to have our big finale of the film when the Yakuza and we all get together. And originally it was going to be filmed in Hokkaido, another island in Japan. It was getting closer to wintertime. And there were decisions, that was the decision that was made to bring that back to shoot in Napa Valley.
I think very early on we discovered that Japan would be expensive. So I said to Stanley, we shouldn't do the end here, we should go to San Francisco. I know a place in San Francisco in wine country, this time of the year, which is looking leafless, slightly graphically bleak, and they trusted, believed, and I sent Norris off one holiday weekend. He went to San Francisco and back in a 3-day turnaround and said, I got it.
The hard part was like to create some atmosphere, because it was a little bit in the wintertime. We had to, we wanted to add some smoke to that, so that you really feel like it's a foggy. And we got those 3 gigantic Navy fog machines that normally the Navy uses to block out their ships. I mean, they can block out, like gigantic like aircraft carriers so that the enemy couldn't see it. Well, that's all great and well, and this was in a valley, and we had to put them at strategic places. But if the wind is against you, forget the fog; it's all around you. So we had to wait quite a while to get the wind to calm down, so we could finally get a chance to blow it in there. But it makes it even more Japanese. It's one of those classic Japanese images that you see on those wood carvings.
The finger cutting, which was such a part of that culture and was done, and there were guys that we interviewed we felt it had to be in the movie. I mean, it was not like some cartoon thing where let's just cut off a finger, I met some, and Warren met some Yakuza who had their fingers cut off, and in fact, they were in jars in the office when you walked in formaldehyde. So, not to have that in the film, I don't know what the analogy would be, but it would be silly. So that was certainly far from gratuitous.
I think that the finger cutting scene in the movie is all about honor, and it's all about the value system of the Japanese culture and losing face and what you do. And I think one of the things that makes this movie so unique is we have a glimpse into a culture that at the time we didn't know anything about, really.
Well, the Napa Valley was tough. We got permission to add days to our schedule because we would never have concluded what had to be done there without the extra days, and Paramount was very good about that. The rain that came down on us was unbelievable. We experienced, I think we were up there for about 10 days of shooting. We probably had 9 days of rain. And at the end, we were down on the bottom of the vineyards, which meant all of the water drained down to the bottom. To move a light, which would normally be one person wheeling a light, took 6 or 7 people because by the time the shot was done, it had sunk in over the wheels in the mud. If you look at the picture, the Yakuza arrives and it's bright sunshine. The shot of Michael and Ken observing them was shot in rain, a different day. So the cutting, there was no sense of it won't match. It had to match because we had to finish by a certain day or we weren't getting any more money.
Bikes got stuck in the rain many times, and bikes fell over, cameras fell over. But ultimately, you ended up mounting even cameras on the bikes of the actors themselves, so we at least could feel, because that mud splashing in their faces, it feels so real. There's no acting there. It's real. It's really happening. But it's all handheld. And again, it's that the reason we did it handheld is to get you a sense of almost being part of it, and really, by making those little moves when either one gets hit, it emphasizes the fight and the pain even more dramatically, I think.
Bobby Bass was our stunt coordinator, one of the best there ever was. Unfortunately, we lost him a few years ago. And he worked to some degree from storyboards, but he more importantly, what I remember was we would spend a lot of time just talking about contact. I mean, we all know about how you fake blows and this and that, but he would work in terms of putting on protection with, actual, there's a difference. Most people are always worried about actors like losing control a little bit, and you always have to kind of keep focused as you do these stunt sequences because they are kind of choreographed like a dance sequence. But he felt secure enough that once the rehearsal was done, he would be like the opening of a football game and would give you a pep talk before you go out and raise your energy levels up to the reality that they should be in those kind of fight sequences. And he paid off, I think, dramatically. Most all of his action was always justified and yet had a real strength and contact to it. And at the finale of the scene, I finally get him and I grab him and I look behind and there's a stake, sticking up out of the ground. And we filmed it two ways, because one way, originally I was going to take him and just throw him down on the stake. And then we also thought, but you know what, if I've got him and if I've learned anything, my character's learned anything, then I'm going to take him in as a prisoner rather than kill him.
The interesting thing was, again, my Celtic side was pulling, saying, drop him on the stake. But if you drop him on the stake, then in a funny kind of way, you've got a dead end. You've just killed him. It's finished. But I was worried that Matsuda was such an attractive villain that he actually better have his comeuppance in the long form, which would better be imprisonment. And so what I thought instead, let's have them both think about it.
But on the take where I was going to kill him, I grabbed him, I looked at the stake, and I looked at him, and he smiled at me. He had this beatific smile.
And I always regret taking out that kind of smile, because I thought that's the moment he was actually willing to die. In other words, it's a fair fight. You have the absolute control over me. It is your choice to kill me right now, and that's fine. So in that look, that's what it was.
And to make a long story short, Yusaku Matsuda died after the movie was over. He'd had stomach cancer, the entire picture. He never said a word about it. And I'm always haunted by the last time I really saw him on that scene when he was smiling, and he obviously knew that he was dying.
Because he was always so cheerful on the set. He was always so positive. And I think at that time in the culture, it was something that people didn't talk about when they had cancer. It was almost like they felt ashamed of it. And I always felt so bad, thinking that if any of us had known that he was struggling with this disease at that time, we would have wanted to be there for him.